My name is Stefan Tanaka. I'm a professor in the communication department. Hey, that's an interesting question. It's kind of a long story. I got interested in the digital humanities, and I've been involved in several administrative kinds of committees with boring meetings where issues about publishing and electronic medias came up. And those things kind of led me to more into scholarly communication. The more I learned about the financing and the nature of our scholarly communication or publishing system, the more I realized that it's broken. I mean, the short way of putting it is that I think we're the only industry in the 21st century where we give away intellectual property. And it's time to do something about it. Yeah, I started paying attention to, I joined Force 11, which is a scholarly communication group that's it started primarily as thinking about how technology can foster improved scholarly communication. It still is. Most of the members are from the science community. The president, though, is a medieval English literature person, so it's very strong on the humanities as well. My work has been, even though I call it the digital humanities, it's been to try and imagine how electronic media could be used differently, or how we could use electronic media to think differently about, in my case, what history can be rather than the way we've practiced it up until now. So, you know, it's been intellectually invigorating, and I guess ultimately the reason to support it is when you see the numbers of how many people access a particular journal, when you see the numbers of how many monographs are actually sold, you recognize that the journal or book monograph publishing system as it is needs to change. We have to think of other means of circulation. It doesn't mean the scholarship is necessarily bad, but it means that there are different places that, or the pricing, access are places that the distribution system is no longer functioning the way it can function. Fulcrum is a new open access monograph press. I chose it in part because it's a new business model which interested me. It's a born digital press, and so I've been interested in it because I thought it would offer opportunities, and it does offer opportunities that go beyond some of the open access presses that exist, and as university presses are starting to move to open access. The business model is an interesting one. This isn't, there's no book charges. It comes from a consortium of college and university libraries who pay an annual subscription that covers the cost of publication. What they get out of it is they're hoping that the press will build a repertoire of monographs that then can be used by their students. So they're thinking about the ecosystem of everything from publishing through sales rather than the narrow world of getting the book published. So I think it's an interesting business model. I hope it's sustainable, but I felt like this is the kind of business model that I would like to support. The other thing that I was hoping for, and this will get me into, where I think we are today. I was hoping that because it's a born digital press, the monograph can be more than a PDF. And so even though my new book is it's completely text-based, there's no illustrations or pictures or anything, I was hoping for different kinds of affordances that exist already in the electronic world. But as we've been building platforms and as we've been thinking about moving to the digital, what we tend to do, and here I'm talking about all of us, including authors, is use the codex as the model. And so by keeping the codex as a model that turns us away from, it doesn't prevent us, but it turns us away from thinking about other ways to use the digital to enhance or provide different kinds of elements in the book. No, I mean, up until I decided to publish with Lever, which was very late. I'm of a generation where you write the book before you look for a press rather than shop book proposals around. I wrote a book, and I wrote the book thinking that I wanted it to be published open access. I was thinking that any open access book could do certain things, which actually isn't true. And so there, as far as I was concerned, there was no difference going to Lever as opposed to going to California, or Princeton, where my previous books were published, or Chicago, or any of the major university presses. It was still peer-reviewed. It went through an editing process that's very similar to my previous editing processes. I was responsible for the index, which is the same thing. So, as far as the production of the book, there really isn't, or at least there wasn't in my case, any difference. Well, one of the reasons I wanted open access is I've discovered lately that my work is being read outside the United States. Maybe more outside the United States than in the United States. This raises a different problem that we're going to talk about later about what we might be able to do with electronic or new forms of scholarly communication. But what I've learned is that there's a robust system of illegally disseminated copywritten books. I mean, all people in the library know about all of these websites, and scholars, especially abroad, in places, especially in Europe, they could get a hold of these books. There's some really good retail online sales outlets, but the more you get away from Europe, the United States, access to the publications is very hard for people to get and very expensive. So that was, that was one of my concerns about, getting access to my work. One of the things that just recently happened that really pleased me was I got an email from Turkey asking to translate a certain section of the book, and it's been translated, and hopefully the translation will be published in Turkish in an open access press, which would probably not have happened in a press that's copyrighted, because because one, it's an excerpt, and the other is the speed by which this person got access to it, and then can turn things around. So that was a nice surprise. Well, this is where I'll have to admit that my involvement in the digital humanities has not been followed by me being a good social networker. And so I have a Facebook account that's been inactive for a long time. I heard that Twitter is going to deactivate inactive accounts, and so I expect that to happen. And that's a real problem because these are important ways for us to disseminate information. I've contacted various people. I've done the normal things, sent copies to friends, to people who I think might be interested. The book is, this other good thing about Lever is the book is actually reasonably priced. It's $12.99. And so, to buy a POD version, if you can get a hold of it, it's not like having to spend $30 for a paperback book. But I haven't sent it around. The press has sent it to the journals, the related journals, but it'll take a while for that to happen, and it's a question in my mind to what extent standard academic journals are going to look at open access press. I mean, Lever Press has the University of Michigan, it has the consortium of colleges and universities, it has the Mellon Foundation support. It has all of the key boxes ticked for proper level of quality work. But it's not a known press. It's not the University of Chicago or Princeton or California Press, and which are almost automatic in terms of books getting at least considered. So I don't know what's going to happen there. It's going to be an interesting problem. I do know that some presses have sent it out for a review. Well, I think that the problems or the questions about distribution have to do with prestige factor or habitual practices. So, people will look at the catalogs from, again, the known presses. But do you look at a catalog from a new press, an unknown press? And this is a question of time and familiarity. When we look through catalogs, we're either using, I don't want to say dead time, but we don't have a lot of time to thumb through catalogs and look for things that are interesting. And so if you get a catalog from Lever Press, and actually they have one now, the first reaction of a lot of people is, and this is what happens when they ask, where'd you get it published? I say Lever Press. What's that? And a what's that in a catalog often, unfortunately, might end up in the circular file next to the chair, right? So, are there distribution problems? I haven't talked to my editor, but I'm sure there are. We unfortunately we're still operating in an industry where the badge of reputation it is important. And this is one of the hurdles that open access publishing has to overcome. It's a good question. I'll backtrack on that and not answer the question, but raise an issue that has bothered me about our current methods of, let alone open access methods, but our current methods of publication is that generally we don't know how well, whether what we published is read or what the influence is. And it's gotten to the point where sometimes I send out an email to people, whether I know them or not, and the subject heading is fan mail. And I'll just say, you know, I read this, and I really think it's XXX, and I don't send things I don't, if I don't like it, I just don't bother. But as a way that, of saying, you know, I think this is really good, and I usually don't go into anything at length, but just as a way to let somebody know that somebody read their book or article and liked it. So, for example, a friend and a colleague and I both published an article in a good journal, and every so often we kind of joke and say, hey, did you find out if anybody read it? And you know, this is a journal that a lot of people look at regularly, but he doesn't know. I found out a little bit, but I don't know. I mean, you know, we don't have a good system of understanding of what the impact of our work is. I mean, this journal, because it's a social science journal, does not have a high impact factor, even though one could argue it might be the most prestigious in my field. But because it's the most prestigious, should that mean it's an important article? Not really, right? So we don't have the different ways of evaluating, and we should, because if somebody uses an article or a chapter from the book or whatever in their course, these are not hard to get metrics on. But we don't have the metrics on most of this kind of stuff. And so actually, if the library can do things, I mean, the library has very good statistics on who uses what. Not necessarily, but how many times, they might have it on who uses what journal. Your surveillance might be better than I want to admit. But how many times an article or a journal is accessed? We the scholars don't get that kind of understanding. It comes in a royalty statement or some kind of, oh, by the way, you know, I used this thing and it worked well in my class or something. You might hear one of those things once in a while, but that doesn't tell you. When friends tell you your work is good, you should be very pleased on the one hand, but also it doesn't mean that there's a broad acceptance of it, right? And so that's where the scholarly communication kind of system can, and here I think the library can play a role. Can help us understand what the usage, and hopefully go beyond usage, of different kinds of publications is, and, you know, through reserves, for example, or the number of articles that you have to copy to put up on reserve. These are all things now that we can get the statistics for. And it'd have to be on a large-scale basis. It can't be a local basis, because that's not going to make a lot of difference to in terms of understanding a kind of impact. Publishing books. Well, I think the UC is doing a good job. Well, a good first step is the Luminos series from UC Press. And you know, quite frankly, I don't know of any difference except that that little word where it says copyright and Luminos someplace on the copyright page that distinguishes the book from a what do we call it, expensive paid book that the buyer has to pay, or a book that's open by open access. And the print version of the book is priced in the same way as the normally published book, or we could call it the traditional system. So I think the Lumino series is good. The libraries have come to pay, as I understand it, for a good portion, if not all, of the publishing costs that the author would normally pay. That I think is important because we don't publish a lot of books, and so for the publishing fees to come out of support for faculty. And the support from faculty can be from the dean, it could be from the EVC, it can be from the Senate Research Committee. There's all these different places where it's possible. It strikes me as a perfectly reasonable thing for the university and different units of the university to support book publishing in the faculty, as long as book publishing remains important, and I hope it does remain important. I think the universities can pay more attention to different modes of scholarly interaction. We call ourselves a public-facing university. I can't get quite, I'm going to get the language wrong, and so the chancellor, if he sees this, will say something to me. But if we are interested in getting our work out to the public, then we should think of rewarding faculty for different kinds of work that get good research out into a broader public rather than the academic public. That those are there's different ways that we can deal with that. I mean, it's just a matter of the will to pay attention to that and figure out how this can play into a significant part of the mission of the university and how the faculty fit into that. I think there's all sorts of different changes in practices that, quite frankly, are not major, but they change very long-standing traditional methods. And I would also argue that they're not going to upset the quality standards and the quality level of the research that we do. Yeah, so if I write a blog, it's written, we have to pay attention to the audience. That blog, or for example, I published an article in the newsletter of the AHA, which is not a publication. It's been read by more people than my articles. And so that kind of ways of getting messages across are important. And so how we change that's going to be an interesting thing. Well, the incentive structure is a matter of having the confidence that the work of our colleagues and how we evaluate it adhere to the quality levels that we expect of our faculty and we want to reward them for it. The system we use right now is I would say equally flawed. I publish an article in a journal and that gets counted. I write a blog that is read by a lot more people. It might have the same information, but it might not be read with as much. In history, I would joke and say, well, I don't have the same amount of footnotes. In other words, scholarly apparatus. Is one more important than the other? The blog is based upon research, and it gets to a different audience. We have to understand that the audiences are important, not an audience, right? That's a simple change. It's a cultural change. It's a mindset change. It's a change that requires that we be more flexible in understanding what the scholarly mission of a university is. We say we're changing that. I hope we are. A different way would be we support. I'll take the Senate example. when I was directing the Center for Humanities, we created a program. One of the great problems for people who write books is to find time to put the different writings that they might have, the different pieces together, into a coherent whole. It really takes a long, dedicated time to do that. And when I say long, dedicated time, it means being able to take a quarter or more and spend several hours a day consistently to follow up and work an idea through over, say, 60,000 or 100,000 words. And then when we were teaching classes, going to different meetings, et cetera, it breaks those days up. So we created a program to get faculty course release and to have basically a writing workshop among the grantees. And so they would get both feedback on their writing, but then the course release would give them some of that time to do that work. Important program. Everybody who went through it really appreciated it. It was supported by the Committee on Research of the Academic Senate. But unfortunately, the support of the Committee on Research of the Academic Senate was annual. And at a certain point, because it continued, it was seen as, well, it worked and it continued, so why should we continue supporting this? Right? Which makes sense, because the Committee on Research's purpose is to seed research. And seeding research is different than continuously supporting a program. But it's not the same people. But anyway, so that's an easy transformation to make. But it takes both a cultural as well as a cultural transformation and an understanding of a very different dynamic in a book publishing world. That would be a great program to have. We were talking about the Mellon Foundation or different plans to try and support open access publishing, and I think Tome might be the outcome of one of these things. I think it's a great program where if people subscribe to, and I think UCSD should join this. But I think they should. The library should negotiate so the library is not paying the bill. But if you are a Tome subscribing university, there are Tome subscribing. I hate that. I actually, to call it Tome, it sounds really soporific. But there are Tome university presses, and so if you select a press, I happen to know that University of Chicago is a member. The University of Chicago Press is a member. Then, the book will be handled in the same way that any book from the University of Chicago Press, except the University of Chicago Press and your university will negotiate the book charges because they're subscribing institutions of this program that's designed to support open access publishing. That's not a major change, right? You're using the existing systems to foster open access publishing. And what I will say is that, if you could double the amount of people who read your book, it's still a very low number. That's a really good thing. And I do, my experience so far with my book is that I've been pleasantly surprised into the different places that the book has reached. And it's still way too early to understand those kinds of things. But, open access does facilitate access to the book. It doesn't guarantee readership. I mean, that depends on the book itself. But the ways then that the university can make minor changes to facilitate this is I think, it's not a hard thing to do. But getting cultures to change is a hard thing to do.